The rain had been falling for 3 days straight, the kind of rain that didn't so much pour as settle, like a damp blanket draped over the city. Outside the window, the sound was a gray sheet, barely moving, blurred by streaks on the glass. Inside, the apartment was quiet, not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the heavy kind, the kind that builds up over time, like dust on forgotten shelves. She sat in the armchair by the window, wrapped in the same soft blue shawl she'd worn every evening since October. Her hands rested in her lap, one over the other, fingers slightly curled, as if holding onto something that wasn't there. She wasn't sleeping. She wasn't thinking exactly. She was just waiting, maybe, or maybe not even waiting. Maybe just existing, one slow breath at a time. The apartment still held traces of their life together. A pair of reading glasses in the side drawer. A faded ticket stub from a symphony concert tucked into a book of poetry. A chipped mug in the cupboard, the one he always used for tea. She never washed it, just rinsed it out gently. Like it was something sacred. It had been 2 years. 2 years since the hospital room, the hushed voices, the moment when the nurse gently closed the curtain, just a little more. 2 years since she'd walked out of that building into the bright, indifferent sunlight, carrying only her coat in a paper bag with his wallet and watch inside. And then, 6 months later, came her own diagnosis. Early stage, don't panic, the doctor had said, kind but firm. It moves slowly in many people. We'll monitor. There are things you can do. He talked about routines, exercise, staying socially engaged. She nodded, took the pamphlets, asked the right questions. But inside, a quiet dread settled, not sharp. Not loud, just a dull, constant hum, like a fridge running in another room. She tried at first. She called friends, went to the grocery store, even joined a book club for a while. But conversation started to slip. Names, dates, the thread of a story. She'd pause mid-sentence, searching for a word that had simply vanished. People were kind to kind, smiling just a little too brightly, filling in the blanks before she even asked. It made her feel like a child, so she stopped going. Stopped answering calls, unless it was her daughter. Let the world shrink to these 4 rooms, the ticking clock, and the view of the water. She used to play piano. Every Sunday morning, without fail. Bach, mostly. Sometimes Chopin, when she wanted to feel something deeper, something that didn't have a name. Music had always been her way of breathing when words failed. But after he was gone, the piano stayed closed. Dust gathered on the lid. She couldn't bring herself to open it. It wasn't grief exactly, though grief was part of it. It was more like fear. Fear that if she sat down, she wouldn't remember how. That her fingers would hover over the keys, blank and useless. That the music, once so familiar, would feel like a language she no longer spoke, so she left it. Let the silence grow. Her daughter came every Sunday. Always brought groceries, things she thought her mom might actually eat, not just stare at apples, oatmeal, that sharp cheddar she liked. And always, always, a little container of soup, homemade, never from a can. That afternoon, her daughter arrived earlier than usual. She knocked softly. She always knocked, even though she had a key, and let herself in. Stamping her boots on the mat. "Hey, Mom," she said, hanging up her coat. Her voice was calm, warm, never rushed. "How's the world out here today?" She turned slowly in the chair, offering a small smile. "Still raining?" "Yep. Seattle being Seattle." Her daughter moved into the kitchen, unpacking the bags with quiet efficiency. She didn't chatter, didn't force conversation. She just was there, solid, steady. That was her gift. She knew when to talk and when to let the quiet sit. After putting everything away, she wandered into the living room. Glancing at the bookshelves, the ones he'd built years ago, with slightly uneven spacing that drove him crazy but made her laugh. "Mind if I tidy up a bit?" she asked. "Go ahead." She started gently dusting, straightening a stack of magazines, picking up a few tissues from the side table. Then she opened the cabinet beneath the TV, the one where old DVDs and CDs had collected over the years. shoved in haphazardly, labels faded or peeling. She pulled out a few discs, wiping them with her sleeve. Most were movies, films they'd watched together long ago. Then near the back, her fingers brushed against something different, a slim black case, slightly bent at one corner. She pulled it out. The label was handwritten in faded blue ink, neat. Careful letters, batch. Goldberg Variations, Glenn Gould. 1981. She paused. She knew this one. Not because she'd listened to it often, she hadn't, but because of when they'd listened to it. Every year, without fail, December 24th. After the tree was lit, after the last gift was wrapped. After the house had settled into that deep, expectant hush before Christmas Day, they'd dim the lights. He'd pour 2 small glasses of sherry. One for him, one for her, even though she only ever sipped hers, and he'd slip this disc into the player. The 81, he'd always say like it was a proper name. The quiet one. She remembered how he'd sit back, eyes closed, foot tapping almost imperceptibly, how her mom would lean her head against his shoulder. Listening, really listening, as the music unfolded, note by careful note. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't dramatic. It was steady, like a heartbeat, like something ancient and true. She turned the case over in her hands. The disc inside was scratched, a few fine lines across the surface, but probably still playable. She looked toward the armchair. Her mom hadn't moved. Still gazing out the window, still wrapped in the shawl, on impulse, not really thinking, just feeling. She walked to the old CD player on the shelf, opened the drawer with a soft click, and slipped the disc in. She didn't announce it. Didn't say, "I'm going to play something." She just pressed play. For a moment, nothing. Just the faint whir of the machine spinning up. Then a single, clear note. A simple, opened chord. Then another. The aria began, slow, unhurried, like a deep breath being taken after a long time holding it. She stood there, beside the shelf, watching at first, no change. Her mom still faced the window. Rain streaked the glass behind her, but then, almost imperceptibly, her shoulders shifted. Just a fraction. Her head tilted, ever so slightly, toward the sound. The music moved forward, gentle, repeating, like waves on a shore. The left hand held a steady bass line, simple and grounding. The right wove a melody above it, tender, unhurried, full of quiet longing. Still, she didn't turn, but her hands, the ones resting in her lap, began to move. Not much. Just the fingers. The index finger of her right hand lifted, then her middle finger, then back, a slow, silent tracing of the keys, inches above her knee. Her daughter held her breath, then a tear. One single drop rolled down her mom's cheek, then another. Not sobbing, just falling quietly, like rain finding its way down a window pane. Her daughter didn't move, didn't reach for a tissue, didn't say a word. She just watched and listened. The music filled the room, not loud, but present. It didn't push. It didn't demand. It simply was like sunlight finding a crack in the curtains. After nearly 2 minutes, her mom finally turned her head, not toward her daughter, toward the piano. Her eyes, usually soft, distant, a little clouded, were clear. Focused, not on the instrument itself, but on something in it. Something behind the wood and wires and keys. Her lips parted just slightly. And then, so softly her daughter almost didn't catch it. A sound, not a word. A hum. The opening phrase of the aria. Just 3 notes. Barely there. But right. Perfectly pitched. Perfectly shaped. Her daughter's own eyes filled. She didn't interrupt. Didn't speak. She let the music play. Let the tears fall. Let the silence, now different, now alive, settle around them. When the aria ended, after its final, gentle resolution, there was a pause. The CD player clicked softly as it moved to the next track, Variation 1. Quicker. Lighter, but her mom didn't seem to hear it. She was still looking at the piano, Her hands had stopped moving, but her breathing, for the first time in a long while, was deep, even calm. After a full minute, she whispered so softly it was almost part of the fading echo that was ours. Her daughter nodded, throat tight. Yeah, Mom, it was. She didn't say is. Not yet. But she didn't say it was like it was gone forever. Either she just let the words hang there, simple, true. Her mom reached up, brushed the tears from her cheeks with the back of her hand, a small, practical gesture, like wiping steam from a mirror. Then she looked at her daughter, really looked, and gave a small, real smile. Not the polite one she used with visitors, not the tired one she wore most days. This one reached her eyes. A little sad, yes, but also warm. Like a light flickering back on in a room long left dark. Put it on again? She asked. Her daughter didn't hesitate. She walked back to the player, pressed stop, then rewind, then play, the whir, the pause, and then, once more, that first open chord. This time, her mom closed her eyes and listened, not to remember, not to fix anything, just to be there in that sound. In that moment, in that room, with the rain outside, the shawl around her shoulders, and the music rising, steady and sure, like a hand reaching out across time, saying, I'm here. You're here. We're still here. She didn't speak again for the rest of the piece. But when it ended a second time, she opened her eyes, took a slow breath, and said, not sadly, not hopefully, just plainly, like stating a fact she'd just noticed, I think. I'd like to open the piano. Her daughter smiled. No big reaction, no cheer. Just a quiet nod, okay? She said. Tomorrow, if you'd like. Tomorrow, her mom repeated, tasting the word, and for the first time in a very long while. Tomorrow didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a possibility. The rain kept falling, but inside the apartment, just for those few minutes, there was no storm. Only sound, only peace, only the deep, quiet truth that some things, the right music, the right memory, the right love, don't fade. They wait, patient, faithful, ready to return, note by gentle note. When the time is right, the next morning, the rain had stopped. A pale, milky light filled the room, the kind that comes after days of gray, soft and forgiving. She was already up. Not in the armchair this time, but standing by the piano. The lid was still closed, but her hand rested on it, just the tips of her fingers. Light as a leaf settling. She hadn't opened it yet. Just stood there, breathing. Her daughter found her like that when she came in later. 2 mugs of tea in hand, one with honey, one without. She didn't say anything. Just set the mugs down on the coffee table and leaned against the doorframe, waiting. After a long moment, she turned. I don't know if I remember how, she said, voice low, honest. Not ashamed. Just stating a fact, like saying the stairs are steep or the tea's gone cold. That's okay, her daughter replied. No one's asking you to play a concerto. Small smile. I just want to see it? So together, she on one side, her daughter on the other, they lifted the lid. It rose slowly, with a familiar creak, like an old friend stretching awake. Dust motes floated in the morning light, catching the sun as they swirled above the keys. The ivory was yellowed at the edges, worn smooth in the middle from decades of use. A few keys had tiny chips, the E flat above middle C. The high G, little battle scars from years of practice, of joy, of late-night improvisations. She ran her hand over the keys, not pressing, just tracing. Like reading Braille, it feels strange, she murmured. Like meeting someone you used to know very well, but haven't seen in a long time. Her daughter nodded. Do you want to try? She hesitated, then nodded once, firm. She sat. The bench was still at the right height. He'd adjusted it once. Years ago, with a folded magazine under one leg to stop the wobble. It still wobbled just a little. She placed her hands on the keys. Fingers stiff at first, unsure. No music came. Just silence. She exhaled. Tried again. This time her right hand moved slowly, deliberately, and pressed a single note. Middle C, clear. True, she blinked then. Almost without thinking, her left hand joined A C an octave lower. Then a G, then an E, A C, major chord. Simple, whole, familiar. She held it. Let the sound fill the room. Vibrate in her chest. Then she let go. A beat passed. Then, haltingly, like someone finding their way down a dark hallway. Step by careful step, she began. Not the whole aria, not yet. Just the first line. Da-da-da. Da-da-da-da. Her fingers fumbled once, skipped a black key, landed on the wrong note. She winced, pulled her hands back. I knew it, she whispered. It's gone. But her daughter didn't reach for the hands. Didn't say it's okay. Instead, she walked to the shelf, picked up the CD player remote, and pressed play. The aria began again, that same quiet. Steady opening, and this time, as the recording played, she let her hands rest on the keys, not trying to play along. Just feeling the rhythm, the rise and fall, the spaces between notes. Her fingers moved again, not to copy, but to echo. To remember, by the third time through, she played the first phrase all the way, 8 bars, and got every note right. Not fast, not perfect, but true. Her touch was softer than it used to be, more careful, like she was handling something fragile. But the music was there. In her hands, in her bones. She didn't smile. She closed her eyes, and a single tear slipped free, not from sadness, not from frustration, but from something deeper. Something like recognition, like coming home and finding the front door unlocked, the lights on, your favorite chair still in the same spot. That afternoon, her daughter made a call. She didn't tell her mom at first. Just said she'd met someone at the library, a man who worked with older adults, helped them reconnect with music. He used to play, she added casually, stirring soup on the stove. Violin said he'd love to hear you play sometime. No pressure, just, if you ever felt like it. She didn't say music therapist. Didn't say Alzheimer's program or cognitive support. She just said he plays, and he's kind. A week later he came. He didn't carry a briefcase, just a small, well-worn viola case and a thermos of tea he'd brought as a gift, Jasmine. Her favorite. He was older, late 50s. Maybe with kind eyes and hands that looked like they'd worked hard, but gently. He didn't shake her hand right away. Just nodded, smiled, and asked if it was all right to sit. He didn't ask about her memory. Didn't ask about doctors or tests. He asked about the piano when she got it, what she loved to play, whether she preferred Bach in the morning or evening. Morning, she said, surprising herself. He's too honest for nighttime. Then, without fanfare, he opened the case, took out the viola, tucked it under his chin, and asked, "Would you mind if I played something with you? Just a little thing." No, sheet music. We'll listen to each other. She hesitated, nodded. He began a simple singing line, slow and tender. Meditation from Thai? She knew it vaguely. A melody from a lifetime ago, heard in a movie, maybe, or on the radio. She listened. Felt the notes settle in the room like falling snow. Then quietly she joined in, not with the full piece, just a few chords beneath his melody. C minor, then F, then G. They weren't rehearsed. They weren't perfect. At one point, he held a note too long. She came in a half beat early. He didn't correct her. Just adjusted, leaned into her timing, let the harmony shift. Made it work, and in that little imperfection, in the way they listened, instead of performed. Something happened. She sat up a little straighter. Her foot, which had been still for months, tapped. Just once. Then again, when they finished, there was a silence, but not the heavy kind. This one was warm. Full. He lowered the viola, smiled. "You have a beautiful touch." She looked down at her hands. "They forget things. They remember more than you think," he said gently. "Music lives in a different part of us. Deeper, older." He didn't say the limbic system or neuroplasticity. He just said, it's like a path through the woods. Even if the signs are gone, the ground still knows the way. She looked at him then, really looked, and for the first time didn't feel like a patient. It felt like a musician. Later, after he left, she sat at the piano again, alone this time. She didn't try the aria. Instead, she played a piece she hadn't touched in 40 years, Clair de Lune. Not the whole thing. Just the opening, that shimmering, dreamlike cascade. Her fingers stumbled. She missed a run. But she didn't stop. She kept going. And in the middle of it, not at the end. Not at a big moment, she laughed. A real laugh. Light. Unplanned. Her daughter, folding laundry in the next room, froze, then came running. "What?" she asked, grinning already. "I don't know," she said, still smiling, hands still on the keys. It just felt like coming home. From then on, music became part of the rhythm of the days. Not a task. Not therapy, at least. Not in the clinical sense. Just something they did. Like making tea. Like watching the birds at the feeder. Some mornings she played alone. Simple things. A Bach minuet. A folk tune she'd taught her students long ago. Sometimes she'd get lost. Fingers hovering. Brow furrowed. But instead of frustration, she'd just hum the next phrase. Wait for it to come back. Or skip ahead. No shame, no rush. Other days her daughter sat beside her. Not to play, but to turn pages. Or just listen. And sometimes she'd join in, not on the piano, but with a small frame drum she'd found at a thrift store. She had no rhythm. Really, she admitted that freely, but she kept time. Steady. Reliable. Like a heartbeat. He came back the next week. And the next. Sometimes he brought the viola. Sometimes just himself to listen, to talk. To sit in the quiet after a piece ended. One afternoon he asked if she'd ever played duets. She shook her head. Not really. My husband loved to listen, but he couldn't carry a tune. He didn't have to, he said. Listening is its own kind of playing. Then he smiled. But if you ever want a duet partner, I'm here. A few days later, she surprised herself. She woke early before the light and went straight to the piano. She didn't think. Didn't plan. She just began the Goldberg aria. This time, she made it through the whole first section, all the way to the repeat. Her hands remembered turns she thought were gone. A trill here. A soft lift there. When she finished, she sat back breathless, not from effort, but from wonder. She picked up the small notebook her daughter had left on the music stand, a plain spiral-bound thing.
No labels.
On the first page, she'd written, in careful, looping script, today. The viola sounded like forgiveness. She turned to a fresh page, thought for a long moment, then wrote, today. My hands remembered how to say hello. She didn't write I remembered. She wrote, my hands remembered, because that was the truth. The mind was still foggy sometimes. Names slipped. She'd walk into a room and forget why. Once, she put the kettle in the fridge and the butter on the stove, a moment that made her daughter laugh, then hug her tight. But the music stayed. It wasn't a cure. No one promised that, but it was an anchor. On hard days, days when the world felt too loud, too confusing, she'd sit at the piano and play just one chord, C major, over and over. Let the sound wrap around her like a blanket, and slowly, something else began to shift. She started humming while she washed dishes, tapping her foot while she read. One morning, her daughter found her standing by the bookshelf, eyes closed, softly singing the melody of Spiegel im Spiegel, a piece he'd played weeks before, just once. She didn't know the name, didn't know the composer, but she knew the feeling. She turned when her daughter entered. It's so quiet, she said, like snow falling on a forest. Her daughter nodded. It is... Who wrote it? A man named Arvo Pint, she said. He calls it tentinebuli, like little bells ringing inside you. She repeated the word. Tentinebuli. Let it sit on her tongue, then she smiled. I like that. Bells inside. That weekend they drove just a short trip to a little cafe near the water. She hadn't been out in months, not really. But the sun was out, and she said she wanted to see the boats. At the cafe, they sat by the window. She held her tea, watching a sailboat glide across the sound. Then, out of nowhere, she said, "Do you think he'd like this place?" Her daughter knew who she meant. "Yes," she said softly. "I think he would." A pause. "He loved days like this," she added. "Quiet, clear, full of space." Her mom nodded. "He always said, music needs space to breathe." She took a sip of tea then, quietly. "I played the aria last night, all the way through. Twice." Her daughter didn't gasp, didn't exclaim. Just reached across the table and covered her hand with her own. "I know," she said. "I heard you." And in that moment, sun on the table, steam rising from the cups. The distant cry of gulls, it wasn't about memory returning, it was about presence, arriving full, whole, real, later that week. He came again, this time with a suggestion. "There's a small group," he said, stirring honey into his tea. "Meets once a week. People who love music. Some play, some just listen, some sing, some tap their feet. No rules. No performances. Just sharing sound." He paused. "They'd love to hear you play, but only if you want to. You could just come and sit, or bring the recording, or bring silence. All of it is welcome." She didn't answer right away, looked at the piano, then at her hands, then at her daughter. "What do you think?" she asked. Her daughter smiled. "I think it sounds like a room full of people who know what it means to listen." She thought about it all night. The next morning, she opened the piano not to play, but to clean it. Wiped the keys with a soft cloth. Polished the wood. Straightened the bench. Then she took the notebook and wrote on a new page, "What if I'm not good enough?" She stared at it then, underneath, in slightly bolder letters, "What if good enough is just showing up?" She closed the book and said, simply, "Okay, let's go." She didn't know what would happen there. Didn't know if she'd play. Didn't know if she'd remember the way back. But for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of the not knowing, because she'd learned something quiet. Powerful, undeniable, even when the mind stumbles. The heart still knows the melody, and sometimes, just sometimes, that's enough. Enough to begin, enough to return, enough to be. Simply hear hands on the keys. Breath in the chest, music rising, gentle and sure. Like dawn after a long night, the community center was smaller than she expected, just a single room with worn wooden floors. Folding chairs in a loose circle and a slightly out-of-tune upright piano in the corner. Sunlight came through tall windows, catching the dust in the air like tiny sparks. There was a table with a coffee maker, a plate of oatmeal cookies, and a sign in neat handwriting, "Welcome Music Hour." 10 a.m.? She stood just inside the doorway, clutching her daughter's arm not tightly, but like someone stepping onto a boat for the first time. Needing just a little steadiness. "It's okay," her daughter whispered. "We can leave any time." But she didn't leave, because the first thing she heard before she even saw the people was music. Not a recording. Not a performance. A man in a navy sweater, sitting near the window, was gently tapping his fingers on the arms of his chair. Tap, tap. Tapped, tapped, ep, in time with something only he could hear. His eyes were closed. A soft smile on his face. A woman nearby, gray hair pulled back in a loose bun, was humming low, wordless, rising and falling like breath. No one was leading. No one was watching. They were just being in sound together. Then she saw him, the one with the viola, already there. Not playing, just sitting among them, nodding along to the hum, to the tap. To the quiet, he looked up, saw her, and smiled. Not big. Not performative. Just warm. Like, "Oh, you came." I'm glad he stood, walked over, no rush, and said simply, "Good morning." It's quieter than I thought it would be. That's the trick, he said. The music's already here. We just help it settle. He didn't usher her in. Didn't introduce her to the group, just gestured to two empty chairs near the piano, one for her, one for her daughter, and went back to his seat. She sat and waited. A few minutes later, a woman with bright eyes and a cane came in, carrying a small violin case. She nodded at everyone, opened the case, and without a word, began tuning slow, careful, listening deeply to each note. Then she played just a single phrase. A folk tune. Simple, tender, like a lullaby for grown dash-ups. When she finished, no one clapped. No one said beautiful or bravo. Instead, a man across the circle, tall, thin, with hands that trembled slightly, began to sway ever so gently in his chair. His lips moved, silent at first, then soft words emerged. The water is wide. I cannot cross over. His voice was thin, a little shaky, but true. And the woman with the violin joined in, not overpowering, just weaving a thread of sound beneath his voice. She watched, listened, and something loosened in her chest. Not all at once, but slowly. Like ice melting in spring, no one expected anything of her. No one looked at her like she was broken. No one asked her to be anything other than exactly who she was. A woman who used to play, who sometimes forgot names, who carried grief and grace in equal measure. After a while, the man with the trembling hands, he introduced himself later as Hiroshi turned to her and asked, "Do you play?" She nodded. The piano. Another nod. He smiled. I used to build radios. Now I conduct the air. Less soldering. More dreaming. She laughed. A real light sound that surprised even her. Then he asked, "What do you love to play?" She thought, not about technique. Not about memory. Just feeling the aria, she said. He nodded, as if that explained everything. Ah, the one that breathes. Later, during a quiet stretch, just the coffee pot gurgling and the hum of the heater, the woman with the cane. Miriam leaned toward her. I used to sing, she said. Voice low and rich, like honey stirred into tea. Opera, soprano. Long time ago. She tapped her temple. The notes are still in here. The body. She lifted her hand. It shook. Sometimes needs a moment to catch up. She understood. You still sing? She said. Miriam's eyes lit up. Every morning, in the shower. Best acoustics in the house. They smiled at each other, not as patient and well, not as sick and healthy, but as two people who knew the same language, even if the accent had changed. Then, without warning, Hiroshi stood, not all the way, just enough to reach the piano. He didn't ask, didn't announce. He just sat on the bench beside her, looked at her, and placed his right hand gently over hers on the keys. His fingers were cool, his skin papery, veined. He didn't take over. He just joined and waited. She took a breath. Then together, her guiding, him following, they began. Claire de Lune. Not the fast part. Not the flashy runs. Just the opening. Those soft, rolling arpeggios. She played the left hand steady, grounding. He rested his fingers on the right side of the keyboard. And when the melody came, he pressed the keys slowly, carefully, letting her set the pace. He missed a note. So did she. They didn't stop. They just kept going, like two people walking side by side on a narrow path, steadying each other when the ground shifts, and in that shared effort, in the space between right and wrong, in the quiet agreement to keep trying, something happened. The room didn't go silent, but it deepened. People leaned forward. Miriam closed. Her eyes, the man who'd been humming softly, began to sway again. Not to the beat, but to the feeling. When they reached the end of the phrase, that beautiful, suspended moment before the music lifts again, Hiroshi lifted his hand. Not because they were done, but because he wanted to look at her. You remember the shape of it? He said, voice thick. The heart knows the shape, even when the hands forget the map. She didn't answer with words. She just placed her hand over his, the same way he'd done to hers, and gave it a small, firm squeeze. That was enough. After that, She started coming every week, not because she had to, because she wanted to. Some days she played. Simple things. A Bach prelude, a folk song she'd taught children long ago. Once she even tried Far Elise, got halfway, forgot the middle, and just made up something new. No one minded. Miriam nodded along, as if the new part had always been there. Other days, she just listened. Hiroshi would conduct arms moving in slow arcs, eyes closed, guiding an orchestra only he could see. Sometimes he'd whisper the names of the instruments. Trumpets. Hold, now strings swell. And you could almost hear them. Miriam, on good days, would sing. Not full arias, but phrases. A line from La Bohème, a verse of an old Yiddish lullaby. Her voice wasn't what it once was, breath shorter. Range narrower, but the soul of it was untouched, pure, unbroken. One Tuesday. It rained hard, the kind that drums on the roof and blurs the windows. The group was smaller, just 5 of them. No.
Oh.
One felt like playing, so they did something new. He brought in a small Bluetooth speaker. No performance, he said. Just sound. We'll listen. Then we'll say one word. Whatever the music made you feel. No right answers. No long stories. Just one word. He played Spiegel, Im Spiegel, the piece with piano and viola. Slow and spacious, like light through a window. They listened. When it ended, silence hung, soft, full. Then Miriam whispered, "Still, Hiroshi. Home." The quiet man by the door. Enough. Her daughter held. She waited. The music was still in her, cool and clear. Like a mountain stream, she thought of her husband. Of the Christmas Eves, of the silence after. She thought of her. Hands on the keys that first morning, of Hiroshi's hand over hers, of the notebook on her piano. She opened her mouth and said, simply, safe. No one spoke after that. They just sat in the quiet. As the rain kept falling outside, not as something to endure, but as part of the music, weeks passed. She began keeping the notebook with her, not just at home. But in her bag, she wrote things down, not dates. Not events, but moments. Miriam sang Summertime Today. Her voice cracked on, and the liven is easy, and it was the most beautiful crack I've ever heard. Hiroshi conducted Beethoven's Seventh, the second movement. I closed my eyes. It felt like walking through a forest at dawn, played the aria for the group, forgot the third variation. So I repeated the second. Someone sighed. Not in frustration. In recognition. One afternoon, after a particularly gentle session, just humming and light piano, Miriam stayed behind. She sat beside her on the bench. I want to show you something, she said, from her bag. She pulled out a small, cloth-wrapped bundle, unfolded it. AMETRONOME. Old brass. Wound by hand. My teacher gave it to me, she said. 1952. Said time isn't your enemy. It's your partner. Let it breathe. She wound it slowly, click, click. Click set to a slow pulse. Then she placed it on the piano. Try, she said. She placed her hands on the keys, started the aria. The metronome ticked steady. Patient, at first she rushed, tried to keep up. Then she remembered what Miriam said, let it breathe. So she slowed, let the notes stretch, let the silences live, and something shifted. The music didn't get faster, it got deeper. The tick wasn't a demand, it was an invitation to trust, to rest, to move with time, not against it. When she finished, Miriam reached over and stopped the metronome. Good, she said. You didn't follow it, you danced with it. That night, at home, she opened the notebook, wrote, music isn't about getting it right. It's about being here with the wrong notes. The shaky hands, the forgotten lines, and still choosing to play. The next week, something unexpected happened. A young woman came in, early 20s, carrying a cello case. Shy, sat in the back. She didn't play at first, just listened, but during the open time. She set up her cello, tuned quietly, and played a single movement from a Kodali piece. Rich, earthy, full of longing. When she finished, Hiroshi turned and said, "You play like someone who's learning how to forgive." The young woman blinked, then smiled, small, real. "Yeah," she said. "I am." Later, she told him she was studying music therapy. Her grandfather had had dementia. Music was the last thing that reached him. She looked at her, really looked. "You remind me of him," she said. "Not in how you look, in how you listen." She didn't say you're like him as in you're fading. She said it like, you're like him in your dignity. In your quiet strength, that meant more than any praise. After the session, as they packed up, Hiroshi came over. "I have an idea," he said, "but only if you say yes. No pressure. Just a thought." She waited. What if? We played together? All of us. Not for anyone. Just for us. One piece. Something simple. Something we all know, even if we don't remember the name. She looked around the circle, Miriam humming softly. The young cellist carefully loosening her bow. The quiet man folding his hands in his lap. "What would we play?" she asked. He smiled. "The one that breathes." The aria, she didn't say yes right away, but that night, she sat at the piano not to practice, to remember not the notes, the feeling, the way the first chord settled in the room like a deep breath, the way her husband used to rest his head back and just be in. The way her hands had remembered. Before her mind did, she played it through slowly, with the metronome ticking beside her, and for the first time, she didn't think, "Can I do this?" She thought, "We can do this." Because it wasn't about solo perfection anymore. It was about shared presence, about Hiroshi's hand on the keys, about Miriam's hum beneath the melody, about the cello holding the bass line, about the quiet man tapping his foot steady, faithful, about her daughter turning the page, about the space between notes, not as absence, but as connection. She closed the notebook, wrote one line. Maybe peace isn't the absence of noise. Maybe it's the sound of many hearts learning to beat in the same room. She didn't know what would happen next. Didn't he? No, if they'd actually play together, didn't know if she'd remember the way. But she knew this. She wasn't alone. And sometimes that's the deepest kind of music. There is the kind that doesn't need a stage, just a room, just a breath, just the courage to begin, not perfectly, not flawlessly, but together, one honest note at a time.